Hi everyone, welcome to the August 2023 intelligence briefing for Farsight. So today's intelligence briefing is about remote viewing politics. So I have to give you a little bit of a background and then I need your help. I actually want advice from you guys, so I'm going to be looking at the chat and looking to see if you guys have any good ideas on this. So let me give you a little bit of background. So we have our streaming service, farsightprime.com, where we are guaranteed to have a venue so that we have some place to put our stuff without being censored. But on the other hand, we have to have some place for people to find us in the first place. So YouTube has been very good for that. Now, we had our human news show that we did since 2016, and that was a long time to do it, and the news was getting repetitive. That was the real problem with it. There wasn't really much new stuff happening, and month after month after month, repetition is terrible for remote viewing. So we stopped that a little while back, and we started to do a podcast that was being done by myself and my son Aziz. But we were still looking for something to replace the human news show that was more earthy, not so much dealing with UFOs or extraterrestrials, something that would have sort of an immediate appeal to stuff that's going on that you want to see. Something that would be great for a new person who's not already knowing anything about remote viewing to see us doing stuff for the first time. So that became sort of an issue. And then it became the issue of view counts. View counts, which is how many people are watching your videos, are really suffering, not just for us, but like everywhere, across the board. There are a few big venues that bring in many view counts, such as Joe Rogan and places like that, podcasts like that, but he's not, well, he gets some on YouTube. He has his own thing on Spotify, of course, but even his stuff on YouTube, short clips, they get good play. And there's a few other big podcasts that get significant attraction. But in terms of the mainstream news, it's really hard to get anything that's similar to that. And then I was watching some news reports on a show called The Hill. The Hill, Hill. And The Hill is supposed to represent, Washington, D.C. And that's a YouTube station, a YouTube channel that is really good, very high-end, alternate source of news. And they have like 1.7 million subscribers. And I look at their stuff because it's sort of interesting. You get a lot of stuff that's not on mainstream. And one of the things that's so interesting is that there's stuff that just doesn't happen, and there's so much censorship. There's that you just don't get stuff. For example, there's a candidate running called Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the Democratic side for the Democratic primary, and he's really been ridiculed and trounced and dragged through the mud by mainstream news outlets. He's actually getting respectable coverage in the conservative news outlets such as Fox, believe it or not. But he's he's called all types of bad names and everything on CNN. Things dealing with him are always considered what they call conspiracy theories and crazy ideas with regard to health and everything. But if you listen to him, he's got some very powerful things he's saying. And so I've seen him being covered on The Hill. So I said, okay, that's interesting. And then there's a woman running, Marianne Williamson, who's running. She's running on the Democratic side again. She can't get any coverage at all. And they had a show on The Hill about her and some of the censorship that's happening with both her and some other people, Robert F. Kennedy and so on. And Marianne Williamson, she's got some very interesting ideas too. She can't get anybody to cover her no matter what. So she has her own outlets in TikTok, believe it or not. So TikTok is the best place you can get to get anybody. And it turns out that among young people, she's actually very heavily watched and favored among young people in like the 18 to the 30-year-old people that watch TikTok. But the mainstream outlets don't even, you'd never even know that she's even running. You can't find stuff about her on CNN or MSNBC and things. You just don't find anything. I've never seen an article about her on BBC or CNN and so on. But she has to go to places like TikTok. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's doing a tremendous amount of publicity, self-publicity, interesting means of conveying information on Instagram, on these really interesting reels where he just talks to people, and then he goes on podcasts, all types of podcasts. And so the mainstream news is really censoring him terribly. And Mariana Williamson, okay, she's being completely knocked off. And then I looked at the footage with the view counts for The Hill, and they have 1.7 million subscribers, which is really big. But you look at some of the view counts for their stuff. Let me go, and I'm going to go to their channel right now, and I'm looking at it. So if I'm looking off to the side, as I'm looking at a screen that has their stuff on it, and they have things like sometimes 2,000 or 3,000 hits, 2,000 or 3,000 views, typically 47,000, 35,000. These are views for their videos. What they do is they have short video clips that are like 10, 12 minutes, 8 to 12 minutes long. So instead of having like an hour, 1 hour show, they have each story being separate. And then they show something about the story, and then two people actually debate it and going back and forth. So it's the same two people doing it. And now they used to have two other people that we used to do that. Who have another news outlet place called Breaking Points, and so it's pretty interesting to sort of see that. Now they're still friends apparently. There seems to be some type of either friendship or collaboration between The Hill and Breaking Points, but it's still alternate sources of news. And so The Hill has 1.7 million subscribers, and they have the Breaking Points has fewer, like 1 million subscribers. Sometimes Breaking Points, they put out fewer videos, but the view count is larger, not spectacularly larger, but larger. And then The Hill has more videos, but the view counts are considerably smaller. So I'm going down to things 2 days ago, and they have 15,000 hits, 38,000, not 7,000 2 days ago, 5,000, 18,000, which is nothing when you compare it to. Okay, here's one that has 107,000, and that one is dealing with Tucker Carlson and so on. But and here's another one that has 177,000. That's sort of large, but typically in the same ballpark, same area. You have 36,000, 21,000, 3,000, depending on the story. So the Biden's student loan plan only got 3,000 views and so on like that. Anyway, so we don't really have the view counts that you get in some other alternate outlets such as PewDiePie. So if you look at PewDiePie, who has an incredibly large subscriber, he has millions of people doing his stuff. And if you look at Instagram, but PewDiePie is just doing crazy antic stuff with no real sort of solid content that's actually educative. Now if you look at TikTok, for example, TikTok is people jumping all over the place and dancing, mostly things like that. But in China, TikTok is not like that at all. They don't allow any of that crazy stuff on TikTok. Their version of TikTok, it's the same company, same thing, but it's got a Chinese name on it. They only put educational stuff on TikTok. It's as if the Chinese political leadership made a decision to try to dumb down the West, especially the Western youth, by putting crazy antic stuff that just detracts them from anything serious on TikTok. But in China, they said, we're not going to let that here. We want our kids to be educated. So it's just an interesting thing. But no, nonetheless, Marianne Williamson, she's been able to get access to her audience, which is a younger audience, on TikTok. So it's been useful for her. And she's actually got quite a lot of support among that group. And then if you look at the mainstream news, you don't get it. You don't even know that she's running. So it's running for the Democratic nomination. So, what you have is that something like The Hill, to use that for an example, they have 1.7 million subscribers, but the view counts are in the tens of thousands. That's not like huge, and not like anything like PewDiePie or Michelle Phan or something like that. She does makeup tutorials and so on like that. Those are huge venues. And then if you look at Instagram, most of Instagram is soft porn. It's people looking as sexy as they can often with as skimpy a clothing as they can get away with. And if you look at them, they're always trying to outdo each other in terms of what they're doing. The more serious Instagram venues get very little play. People who do just straight art get very little play. People who do just straight news, they don't typically get very much play. But if you get people jumping out of airplanes or jumping off the sides of cliffs with the wingsuits and so on, or if you have sort of soft porn, which is erotic type of stuff, the view counts often go up. Models typically have successful models often have very large view counts. So, and they have to publish regularly, and they often have companies that actually publish their stuff to keep their social media up to date. And so it becomes a real issue for us when we're trying to look at what other people are doing to sort of attract an audience to their main idea. It's not easy. Robert F. Kennedy is having his own problems. Marianne Williamson, she's having her own problems. And it's just really tough. And the level of censorship is just right off the board and right off the scale. So we just like so many other people and groups, we've had our own battles with shadow banning, where it makes it hard to discover us sometimes on YouTube or Google because they shadow ban our name and so on. So we're still there. We're still on. We still have our websites. We still have our YouTube stuff. But it's hard for people to actually to find us in the first place. So if you just do searching for remote viewing, it's hard to find us. So they're actually starting to change that a little bit because we've been complaining about it publicly. And so it looks like somebody's watching and listening and trying to cover their tracks so it doesn't look like we're being shadow banned, but we're still being severely shadow banned. So, and that's the same thing that's happening with Marianne Williamson, who's running for Democratic nomination for president, as well as JFK Jr. If you try to find a lot of stuff that's dealing with him on a serious basis with regard to news articles, you just don't find it. So the level of censorship is just right off the scale. And the level of control is just right off the scale. So what we're trying to do then is say, well, how do we become relevant? How do we become, in a way, something different? If we just try to redo news stuff, well, the news people are being censored. Like a really great show like The Hill on YouTube, they may have a lot of subscribers, but they don't have millions of people watching each one of their videos. So they're even having sort of an audience problem, and they've got top-of-the-line equipment, really great presenters. It's a real challenge. So Aziz, my son, he brought up something. I talk about this stuff with him all the time. I mean, this and everything. So it's like two brains work better than one, and he thinks a lot like me, and we sort of thrash everything out. He's been reading the Foundation trilogy by Isaac Asimov, the original three, and he found something in the book Foundation and Empire, and he said it was relevant to this, and so he he put it he put it on Telegram for me, and let me see if I can put it up there. The focus doesn't work too well. Anyway, you can see how he put it in blue. He marked it in blue for me, so I'd be sure to see it. Okay, anyway, I'm going to read this short paragraph, and this is a paragraph where they're talking about the Emperor Cleon. Now, the Emperor, he's the Emperor of the galaxy. And the real question was, how does he always stay so strong? And so what was sort of sparking this comment here is that there was a general, General Rios, who was very successful in doing things that the emperor wanted. So you had this foundation group that was expanding, and General Rios would take his troops, his spaceships from the empire, and go out and defeat the new things that were coming up from the foundation group, and then General Rios was knocked off, and there was a real question, like, how did that happen? And so here's the question. Here's the point, that the thing that is raised to me. But what keeps, actually, I want to make sure I watch your chat, just in case anything goes wrong. I want to make sure I get to see what you guys are saying. Okay. But what keeps the emperor strong? What keeps Cleon so strong? It's obvious. He is strong because he permits no strong subjects. A courtier who becomes too rich, or a general who becomes too popular, is dangerous. All the recent history of the empire proves that to any emperor intelligent enough to be strong. So the basic idea he was saying is, my son was pointing out, is that one of the ways people in control or groups in control stay in control is by snuffing out smaller groups that have the potential to grow, that have the potential to rise. And one of the ways to do that is to stop the information from getting to them. If you look at the censorship that's done over the internet in former Soviet Union, China during Mao Zedong's reign, actually China even now, and to some extent Russia now. So there's a tremendous amount of blocking on the internet. People just can't get the information. And so if you're in Russia, for example, and you're a potentially popular person that might challenge Vladimir Putin, you typically either get killed in some way or arrested and put in prison. There's one of his opponents right now who's been in prison. They tried to kill him first, but that didn't work. He was brought back to life in Germany, and now he's in prison. And then you have the Prigozhin, the guy that was running the Wagner group in Ukraine as well as in parts of Africa. He was just killed in a plane crash that happened in Russia, and everyone who watched it said he's going to die some way. I mean, Vladimir Putin simply doesn't allow competitors. Prigozhin was the guy who staged the invasion into Russia. He's Russian, of course, but he had that march towards Moscow a while back, and his troops he made an agreement with Putin to move into Belarus and to have his troops go into Belarus. And that's sort of a saga still in progress. And then the real question is, what's going to happen in Africa? They have tremendous amount of operations in Africa to provide security, but they're really taking a lot of the wealth out of Africa in terms of gold and diamonds and things like that. But nonetheless, they offer some immediate security arrangements for some of the people that are in power in various African countries. So, especially ones that have heavy mineral contents and so on. But anyway, Prigozhin was knocked off. But he died in a plane crash, and how that plane actually crashed is up to her debate. But pretty much everybody was expecting him to die in one way, shape, or form in the near future. So that sort of happened. Okay, so what we have with this Foundation trilogy, the thing that my son Aziz really pointed out, was that anything that becomes too popular, you have to prevent. If the person or group becomes too popular, you have to knock them down. You have to squish them. But it's easier to prevent them from becoming popular in the first place, and that means limit the information that you have that comes out relating to them. Okay, so and then the next few sentences in this text is General Rios was the one who was fighting. He was very faithful to the emperor, but he won victories. So the emperor grew suspicious. All the atmosphere of the times forced him to be suspicious. So did Rios refuse a bribe? Very suspicious, ulterior motives. Did his most trusted courtier suddenly favor Rios? Very suspicious, ulterior motives. It wasn't the individual acts that were suspicious. Anything else would have done, which is why our individual plots were unnecessary and rather futile. It was the success of Rios that was suspicious. So he was recalled, accused, condemned, and murdered. Do you get the idea? So even someone who's fighting for the persons in power, if they're too successful, the persons in power say, that's a danger. Now let's go to Star Wars. We had, of course, the Emperor, Darth Sidious. Ooh. Well, he had Anakin Skywalker kill off Count Dooku. Now, Count Dooku was incredibly faithful and fighting for Darth Sidious, the Emperor. And the Emperor had him kill Count Dooku off. And then Darth Sidious, the Emperor, after Anakin Skywalker killed him off, he said he was getting too big anyway, so he had to be eliminated because he was too much of a competitive power. Meaning Count Dooku could have been eventually a threat to the Emperor himself, and so that was, by his very success in fighting for the Emperor, he was becoming a threat to the Emperor. So he had Anakin Skywalker knock him off. So the idea is you stop the opposition mostly by preventing it from actually. Oh, and someone on the chat said Prigozhin was a comrade of Putin at one time, and the media made out all was okay between them, and then the march to Moscow was known of. Yeah, that was it. So Prigozhin was a supporter of Putin. Then they had sort of a falling out, and Prigozhin was actually more upset with some of the generals in Moscow. So he was really upset with the way the war was going, and so this march towards Moscow was actually an attempt to get rid of some of the generals. But anyway, the basic idea is that he became obviously a threat to Putin, that he could take his troops and march halfway from between Ukraine and Moscow. He marched halfway to Moscow, and he stopped by his own free will. He didn't. He wasn't stopped by the military. He just stopped. And so, the real issue is he really demonstrated that he could be a threat. And then once you demonstrate that you can be a threat to the powers that be, then the issue is you got to get rid of that threat. Okay, so if we look at that in terms of the context of what we see happening in the news with regard to political stuff going on and candidates running for office, as well as the UFO stuff, it's a real issue. For example, there was a big splash in July and early August for UFO disclosures that was happening, and they had hearings in the Congress. Now there's been a really strong effort to stop the hearings, to have no more public hearings. And one representative, who was a big shot, he actually said this is going to degrade the public faith in our Defense Department if we have any more public hearings. So they're really sort of dumbing that down. And then there were some attacks on the David Grush, one of the main whistleblowers, talking about his history with PTSD. He came back from Afghanistan with PTSD. I mean, Afghanistan was these wars, the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. They were rough wars, and it really affected people. So I remember when I was in college as an undergraduate, and a lot of people were coming back from Vietnam. They had PTSD right off the scale. I mean, I didn't know any Vietnam veterans that didn't have severe PTSD. And so I remember situations where there was this guy, I was renting a room in a house, and one of the guys that was in the house, we had a party in the house, and one of the things that people tried to do is they tried to not talk to him during the parties, especially after he had a beer or two, because he eventually would start crying and then start relating the stuff that he was dealing with in Nam, and how he would have to pick up his friends by body parts. He would describe the body parts that he would pick up and put into the body bag during the fighting when the war was going on and the guns were going off and people were being blown up. And then he would start crying, and once he starts crying till 6 a.m. You're sort of stuck there. You can't sort of go off and do something else. So PTSD is and he had trouble, of course, holding a job, but all the vets that I ran into, they all had trouble holding a job. The PTSD was just off the scale. Anyway, so when David Grush came out and did this disclosure thing, the PTSD episodes were all in the past. He had recovered. His troubles with alcoholism during that time period as well, past, all recovered. And he was back in the Defense Department, and he had full security clearance and working fine. And then after the disclosure thing happened, these stories started to come out about discrediting him because of PTSD and alcoholism. But no one ever asked any questions about the people who were coming up with the discrediting stuff. No one said, well, where did you come from? One thing I do know is this is you don't have to believe me if you don't want, but I'm just saying for myself, I know this to be an absolute fact, that the intelligence services have people that they work with, contacts that they can rely on in all the major news outlets. All. There's no exceptions. And so if you have somebody coming out from some news source saying they got a lead from someone in the Defense Department and they followed it up and then found out through public records that they had to find about the past PTSD and alcoholism of David Grush, it's made to look like the reporters did it all by themselves. But the Defense Department has people placed in all major institutions. That includes all universities, all major universities. For example, if you're an astronomer or a physicist that has major grants, those telescopes are enormously expensive. And you have to have money to build the telescopes as well as to use the telescope time, for example. That money, a lot of that money comes from Defense Department. Well, the intelligence community considers those academics as their employees. They work for the Defense Department because the money comes from the Defense Department. So the employees, actually, the professors, say, oh no, I work here at the university, but the big money for all their work comes out of the Defense Department. And they can say, no, I'm an independent, I have tenure, I work at the university, and so on like that. But that's not how the intelligence people think of it. And if they want something from a mainstream astronomer or physicist or something like that, they just contact them. And my experience has been that the academics don't blink. They jump. I mean, if the people sending them money ask them for a favor, what are they going to do? Say, go blank yourself? No, I'm not going to do that. And then risk what happens to their next grant application for like $200 million? No, they're going to take it seriously. So at least that's the way that the intelligence people think of this. And they have people everywhere and all the major institutions. So from all, and that includes all the major, and I don't want to go through particular news outlets and mention them. I'm just saying all. You can't, and if that's the way, and it's not saying that the intelligence people are bad. That's just a job they have. They're supposed to have contacts in all of that. And so the issue of thinking that what you're hearing in the news is objective in any real sense at all is nuts. It's crazy. It just doesn't happen. It's all a game of manipulating the public in one way, shape, or form. It's just constantly, full stop, end of story, manipulation. How to control the masses. That's the question. How to control the masses. So here we are at Farsight trying to show people that remote viewing is real. And we have a particular interest in extraterrestrials, but that's not all we've done. We have a ton of archaeological studies, we have a ton of religion studies, we have a ton of studies that are political. We did the 9/11, we did JFK assassination, Martin Luther King assassination. We've done a ton of stuff. We did President Xi Jinping of China, Vladimir Putin of Russia, and so on. So we have a whole bunch of stuff, but what we typically do is we go in phases. We go and we find something, and something sort of happens. It sort of says, wow, this is big. And then it takes us some months to sort of exhaust that sort of area. One of the things that's been, some of the people in our followers have been complaining, for example, that we have focused too much on UFOs and extraterrestrials since like January. But that was a phase we were going through. That's something that just happened because in December we had somebody, a flight controller, Lincoln Lounsbury, come to us and tell us how to reliably take videos of UFOs. Like no one had ever done that before. You always have people having a UFO video. There's lots of them. You can see them on Instagram all over the place. But they're like one person has one video. But if you have millions of people having videos, people collect them, but they're always one-offs from one person or another. But Lincoln Lounsbury told us how to do it so we can get them whenever we want on demand. And then we started doing that in January, and no one on the whole planet Earth had ever done that before. And we had to get new camera equipment to do it. We had to get it configured properly, and it was a whole 9 yards of learning how to do it. But once we did it, no one had ever done that before, and it was proving that the extraterrestrials that we had been talking about for decades were real, because you could record them, you could see them. So that was something that took us a while to get through. We had to actually go through a lot. So we've been working on that for like 8 months to sort of show people how to do it, how to replicate it. And now there's a lot of people doing what we've done. We've actually conveyed that information of how to actually take those videos, and other people are actually doing that now. So actually that's been very successful. But we also have our regular interests. So those people who think we've been focusing too much on the extraterrestrial thing, just give us a break. We had to get through this. This whole thing had never been done before. Now, if you go to my Instagram site, Courtney Brown Farsight, all one word, Courtney Brown Farsight, F-A-R-S-I-G-H-T, all one word, no spaces, you'll see a bunch of UFO videos. It's extraordinary, because on other people's sites you can find UFO videos that were sent in by somebody, but it's always some person doing it, and they have one. But now we have a situation where we have one group, us, and we have a whole bunch of UFO videos all done by us. It's not like we have one. We have like zillion. We have like a lot of them. Actually, we have zillions, and we have published a whole bunch. But we're still putting those up. So after another year, we're going to have a huge collection. But they're not videos that other people took. They're videos that we took, and you can't find that anywhere else. It doesn't exist. So videos that we took, and they're really, really great. I had a news person, I was on a podcast, and one of the people on the podcast said, Courtney, I've seen a lot of videos on UFOs and stuff like that, and the so-called Tic Tac video that the government released, that's really a piece of crap compared to the stuff we have. The stuff that we have is really good. The Tic Tac video that the military released is like, what? And so complaints about that video are legitimate. It's fuzzy, it's foggy, it's weird and stuff like that. Ours are really clear. And so that was a big deal. It had never been done before, so you've got to give us a break when it takes us a while to go through that with people. And then we started to do remote viewing studies on the UFOs that we were getting. So that was really important. But the problem is back to getting people to know what we're doing when they don't know anything about us. Despite the shadow banning, YouTube is still the place where the eyeballs are. And we're starting to use Instagram. But the real question is, what do people see when they come to, say, YouTube if they've never heard about us before? So we said, okay, let's deal with... I was actually having a brainstorming session with Intysam. She was in the studio where I am right now, and she had just finished recording her ET News as well as the Next Mysteries. Not the Next Mysteries, but the one after the Next Mysteries. And so I told her my concerns, and I went over the view counts on the show, the news show, The Hill, and I was saying, you know, like, how do you break out of that when you have the situation of trying to dampen people down, just like you found in the Foundation stuff. Now, the Foundation stuff is with Emperor Cleon, as well as what you saw with Prigozhin in Russia. If someone does become too big and becomes a threat to the authority, that's when the authorities come in and try to crush them. But before that happens, they try to limit the impact so they don't grow that big in the first place, and that's what Emperor Cleon was talking about. But with his General Rios, he had to kill him off because he had just become too popular. Now, that was a general that was working for Cleon and was faithful. But the Emperor Cleon said he's too successful, and he killed him off. Okay, and that was what happened with Count Dooku when Darth Sidious had Luke Skywalker kill him off. So, you know, the real question is, how do you... When we're in a situation like where we are, where we're trying to break out of the box, we're not super big, but we have all the infrastructure to be super big. Our own streaming service that's really nicely done, run by Vimeo, and it's really solid. Nothing really can break, and we do have a YouTube following, not huge, but it's you know, about 78,000 YouTube followers, which is in terms of YouTube, that's very, very respectable. But how do you get into the millions? How do you break out of the box with this type of content? And then when you do break out of the box, do you run into the situation like General Rios and Emperor Cleon? If you break out and become too big, what happens then? Do you run into a situation like with Count Dooku when Darth Sidious says he's just too successful, we got to get rid of him, and he had Anakin Skywalker kill him off. So, but we can deal with these issues one after the other, but the basic issue is we're trying to save the planet in a very real sense. We are trying to save the planet. We have discovered that the planet is being run as a prison system, and it's being run with tremendous efficiency. And the most important element of that control is information control. And we have discovered that the main reason for the prison system to be operating the way it is for a huge level of human trafficking. The big three things that make money on this planet, and money isn't the thing that's driving the prison system, but nonetheless, the three big things is, number one is human trafficking. Number two is drugs. And number three is arms sales. So human trafficking, the biggest human traffickers on the entire planet, we have found are the extraterrestrials themselves, the bad guys. And they made these agreements with the United States government, for example, written agreements to allow them continue to do their experiments. But experiments is just a fancy scientific word to cover up what's really going on, which is human trafficking. and human trafficking on the level of millions. And this has been written about extensively by people like the late John Mack from Harvard, but also in terms of the abduction experience, but also in terms of David M. Jacobs, his latest book, Walking Among Us. His stuff is a real interesting read, especially if you read all of his books where you see it took him a while to slowly piece together what's actually happening. Now, he's got a problem in that he only looks at things from the perspective of those people who are directly working with the abduction phenomenon. So he's directly working with people who are being abducted. So he doesn't see a larger picture of the good ETs who are not doing the abductions. But he sees the bad side of it really clearly. So it's really valuable. His stuff is like it's worth its weight in gold. But in academia, he had a very tough time. He was never promoted to full professor, and he had a very tough time, convincing people of what he did, but the reality of what he did. But he kept publishing, and now his work is really extremely valuable. So the idea for us that is if this place is being run as a prison, and the information control is the dominant means of keeping the prison operating, meaning the prison would break down and people would be free if the disclosure thing really happened. But the prison system is so tightly controlled that if the disclosure thing actually happened, the level of tumult would be unbelievable when people realized what was really going on. And so the real question is, how do we approach that so that we can bring new people in so that when they come to our YouTube channel, they can actually see something about what we do? So what we decided is we don't want to go back to doing human news. That was just becoming too repetitive. So what we decided is there's nothing stopping us from just doing political stuff. And political stuff is actually interesting, but we have to be very careful about what you do with political stuff. So what we're really interested in, what would be helpful with respect to political stuff. Now, if we did, for example, things where we did deep mind probes of all the presidential candidates, including President Biden and things like that, Donald Trump and everybody else, what do they really know? What do you really get out of those deep mind probes that you don't get out of the news? I mean, the big thing dealing with President Biden right now is he's obviously, and I don't want to talk about my politics, but I have nothing against President Biden at all. But he's really getting old. And so if you look at it from the perspective of, and I don't mean old in just a chronological sense, he's just getting old. He's aging. And you can see it. You can see it in his face. He doesn't look like he looked even 3 years ago. He's sleepy. He doesn't walk the same. He falls asleep in major things. He's just getting old. And I'm speaking from someone who likes him, who thinks he's a good guy. But he's just really fading, and he's fading quickly. I don't see how he could possibly make it until the November election of 2024, at the rate at which he's fading. I mean, I just look at him and I sort of say, whoa, how is he going to do this with the vigor of that campaign? Now, the last campaign, he didn't have to go out and campaign so much. A lot of it was done from within an environment because COVID was going on, so you couldn't actually go out and meet people and do the normal campaigning stuff. But that's supposed to happen this time. Now, the real question is, are they going to bring the COVID restrictions back with the excuse that COVID is back and the needs to use masks and distancing? And at this point, I'm suspicious of everything. So if that did happen, would that happen because they're trying to prevent people from actually interacting with President Biden because he really doesn't have the energy to go out and interact with people? So, what are we supposed to do if we do, deep mind probes of people? What are we supposed to do if we do deep mind probes of Donald Trump? Okay, well, if we go into President Biden's head, we'll find an old guy who's a little sluggish in his thinking and has got a lot of body aches, stuff like that, and he may or may not be fully aware of how old he is and how bad it is. We might have to go into this, people around him and see if they're worried and stuff like that. But would that be a surprise? Would that be something that would be of interest to an audience? It's sort of so obvious. So I wasn't saying these things about Biden in order to criticize him in the slightest. I'm just saying, shouldn't we, if we're going to do something with remote viewing, doing something that you can't get anywhere else, something that's unusual, something that you can't see is sort of obvious. With Donald Trump, well, he's always run the presidency and his post-presidency life, including stuff that's going on now, as a reality TV show. He apparently loves it. Anyway, when you looked at his mugshot, when he's looking like that in his mugshot, and immediately after they got the mugshot when he was booked in the Fulton County Jail, they were making mugs, coffee mugs out of it, and then putting it on T-shirts and stuff like that. I mean, it was it's a reality TV show. The whole thing is crazy. But so what are we supposed to do if we go into President Trump's head? We'll see what we see on the surface. Are we going to get any information that you can't get anywhere else that you really need to know? That you can't get, for example, on The Hill, that YouTube news show. So the real question, are we going to just duplicate the types of news? Because on The Hill, they've been talking about all these issues. They've been talking about Biden's age, and they've been having video recordings of him nodding off and falling asleep when he's at important meetings and so on. They show him walking, and he looks like he's ready for the old age home. I mean, they show this stuff and they sort of say, what are we supposed to, and they're not trying to criticize Biden, they're just showing the videos and say, what are we supposed to think about this? And with regard to the Donald Trump stuff, they talk about this openly as well. So if we do the remote viewing side of it, what new element are we bringing to the table? What are we bringing to the table? What is the new element that you can't get anywhere else? And so that's been a question, and that's what I was talking about with Intysam. And then last night, I was talking about that. My son is traveling right now, so I was talking about about that with him last night. What's the new element that we bring that would bring people in to what we do, and then also expose them to what we do in a new and interesting way? And it was a question. We didn't really have an answer for that. So one of the things that we're really good at is doing the extraterrestrial thing. And it's not just that we have projects with remote viewing where we dive into the extraterrestrial issues, but we have now photographs of the extraterrestrials, and we have shown people how to make their own photographs so they don't have to believe us, they can do it themselves. So we've really gone the extra mile to have that realistic extraterrestrial connection. Yet, how do we do that? Now, if this is actually being run as a prison, this planet, then it's got to be the extraterrestrials that are running it as a prison, so they have got to be involved in the news distribution issues. So this thing we did with Emperor Cleon from the Foundation, as well as the stuff we did with Star Wars and the stuff that we see elsewhere, is you don't wait until somebody becomes really big, so you have to kill them off, like the way Darth Sidious, the Emperor, killed off Count Dooku, or the way Emperor Cleon killed off General Rios in the Foundation series. That's sort of a move of last resort. You kill them off before they get big, or you dampen them down before they get really big. Sometimes it's a real question of what we are going to do that will bring that new element in and keep it interesting for us, as well as introduce the audience to what we do. So if the extraterrestrials are involved in the information control process, it might be interesting for us to deal with politics from the level of news media manipulation done on the extraterrestrial side, meaning going into people's heads and following the trails to see where the ultimate control and information funneling is actually happening. So nowhere in the news do you get sort of an extraterrestrial element involved in the manipulation of the news. So in The Hill, for example, the YouTube show, they do talk about how the major media is censoring Robert F. Kennedy and Marianne Williamson. And that's a big deal, how that censoring has happened. And they've also talked about how the whistleblower David Grush has been attacked in terms of personal, just trying to say that you shouldn't take any of his UFO disclosure stuff seriously because he had a problem with alcoholism and PTSD after Afghanistan. But they're totally ignoring the issue that with, for example, with David Grush, is David Grush's reputation was never the issue at all. The issue is that he had his security clearance at the Pentagon. He was supposed to do this job of finding out what was going on with the UFO stuff. And he did that job, and he's simply reporting back the things that he found out from the other people. So the issue has never been David Grush. It's always been the other people, the people he was talking with, the people who actually did have first-hand information, who actually did work on the crashed ET ships or the intact ET ships, the people who actually did work with the extraterrestrials, the so-called, now they got the new word for it, non-human biologics, which is crazy, but nonetheless, so those people, the people who worked, those are the ones he talked with. Those are the story. It's not David Grush. You can't say, okay, I'm going to discredit David Grush and thus get rid of the whole thing. It's the other people that he talked to. Those are the story. Now, the interesting thing is that the news media never went that way. As soon as they started the discreditation of David Grush, it was like, well, is David Grush the story? And so you get the idea. Before it was getting a little bit too big. So in order to dampen it down before it gets too big, you try to discredit the source, which was David Grush, the whistleblower. And then it stopped them. And then the media stopped asking, well, what are the people he talked with? Who are those people? And so you can see that same pattern. Crush, crush, crush. Don't allow things to get out. All right, so now it gets back here to Farsight. And we obviously have some level of protection, otherwise we wouldn't be operating. We wouldn't have the studio, we wouldn't be doing this, I wouldn't be talking to you. If the powers that be were going to crush us, they'd crush us if we didn't have some level of protection. So that should be obvious to people. You see like what happened with Cleon, Emperor Cleon, and General Rios and the Foundation, as well as Tsar Sidious and Count Dooku and Anakin Skywalker. If they have the power to crush people, they will crush people. They don't want any opposition. They don't want it to rise up. They don't want it to rise up. So obviously, you should put two and two together and say, given the level of censorship out there, obviously Farsight has some level of protection somewhere. So someplace in the government, there's a branch in the military, for example, that is keeping us alive. So the whole military, you can't say his military is bad. You have to say it's probably split, with one half of them supporting the bad ETs for whatever reasons. And I'm not criticizing those reasons. They probably think altruistically they're trying to do a good thing by getting technological help with those bad ETs. They don't understand what they're really getting into. Maybe they do, some of them. And then the other half of the military is realizing that's wolf in sheep's clothing. That's not good, and they're keeping us alive and supporting us. But the military, when split, can't resolve this stuff all by themselves. There are political actors, and those political actors get controlled, the manipulation. So the real question is, what do we do? So we are going to be starting this new political thing. Now, you have to understand, it takes us at least a month of lead time to get anything together at all. Our ET News, we do that 2 months in advance. Our mysteries, we do that 2 months in advance. It takes us a long while to get the stuff that you see. So we're starting the political stuff in September, which is like the end of next week. That's when we're going to begin it. And that's in terms of when we are actually doing our sessions and sorting it out. But you're not going to see it until October. So you're going to actually see the political stuff roll out. And then the real question is, what are we going to be putting in? We don't want to redo what you're getting in, like, for example, The Hill or Breaking Points, those two YouTube news outlets. Because you can already get that stuff there, and you sort of see what's obvious. So the real question is, what are we going to do that's different? Somehow we have to find our place. We have to find our niche. And we are really good. There's nobody on the planet Earth that has more experience dealing with the extraterrestrials than we do. And I've been open and honest with that. I've been, recently this year, because I knew we had heard actually that the ETs were going to the bad ETs are going to try to do something that was, there's this thing called Project Bluebeam where you have a fake alien attack. And so we had heard that it was possible that they could actually try to define us in terms of like what we do with regard to aliens as being a bad thing. So we had to, before that, when we heard that was going to happen, we really said we have to preempt that and just open up and tell you everything that's been going on with us with regard to the extraterrestrials. So I've been open with that in a number of videos and presentations. I've told you about my own personal interaction with the extraterrestrials physically, like they're seeing you, like you and me, and going back all the way to when I was a kid, and our own work with extraterrestrials. The fact that even I have a daughter who's on the ships, Aziz's half-daughter, you might say, and so we've had direct help from the extraterrestrials, and the government has been watching us. And in the very beginning of Farsight, they were really intrigued by, like, what is this going on? Why are the extraterrestrials literally doing something with Farsight in particular? So we now have been very open since the beginning of this year with our own extraterrestrial involvement. We have meetings with the extraterrestrials. We interact with them. We get information. We're trying to do the disclosure thing. We're trying to help the population get out of this prison. We're part of what we call the good ETs. And there's nobody more experienced in dealing with these ETs than us. And we have been showing you what the bad ETs are doing. And we couldn't do that if the bad ETs have tremendous resources. There is no way in the world we could send our remote viewers in to see what the bad ETs are doing unless we had help with the good ETs. The good ETs enable us to do that. Because the bad ETs have ways of blocking remote viewing. And so obviously we're able to circumvent all that blocking and show you what's actually going on. And the whole purpose everything that we're doing is to make everything transparent so that you know both sides. And then ultimately that involves a complete revision, a complete rewriting of all of human history. That stuff you're getting in schools is just simply wrong. All of our Farsight projects are oriented around re-educating everybody. And so in order for this to make a big dent, a big deal, this is going to have to blow big at some point. There's going to have to be a moment of major disclosure when people realize that the Farsight stuff is real. And we're not hiding anything. We're not holding anything back, including our own extraterrestrial interactions. So, and we're showing people how to take videos of the ships, clear as day, so that you can make your own convincing proof that the extraterrestrials are real. Anyway, so at some point that's going to have to become big. I mean, like, really big. So what do we do now in the middle to slowly get more relevance to the major audience? And that's going to have to be we think that's going to have to be something that connects them with what they want to see in the first place, which is sort of new stuff. Anyway, so there's some things we can't do. We can't jump around half naked like with TikTok videos and try to attract attention that way. We can't do the PewDiePie type of thing of acting wild and crazy while playing computer games. So we have to stick with what we do, which is remote viewing, and then we have to connect that to things that people are interested in. So the closest thing that we can get, which was to the human news story, and our view counts for the human news were typically running around 20,000, which is very respectable, then the best thing we can do is go after contemporary political things, but not trying to predict the future, but trying to explain the politics. So that's how we're going to change. It's not going to be like human news, we're trying to predict what's going to happen next month. Rather, we're going to try to take what people are seeing and explain it. We can go into the future and see where this is leading and so on, but it's going to be sort of a political dimension. And some of that has got to have to tie back to what the extraterrestrials are doing, because they're manipulating a lot of the news that people are getting. So, anyway, that's the plan. That's the thoughts. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about remote viewing politics. Like, how do you do it? And how did we get to this point? And that's where we are right now. So, anyway, we're at 8:05, so actually that's Eastern U.S. time. So you guys have been great. All right, let me see. I'm looking at the chat now. And one guy says, I mean, shoot, there's a niche for naked RV, I bet. Okay. All right. All right. So some people are talking about advertisement and stuff like that. Anyway, so I'd like you guys to think about this yourself. It's not an easy answer. A lot of people give us suggestions. Do this, do that. Some people say, bring back the Time Cross Project. I just saw that. Actually, Intysam and I were talking about that before. Time Cross Project stuff was interesting, but they were small-scale projects, meaning they weren't like really big things that people had to know about. They were small, like they weren't like major mysteries. They were smaller questions. And so that's why we called them Time Cross. And they had sort of an interesting curiosity with these things, but they weren't like the big issues. And then we wanted to go to the bigger issues, and so we called those mysteries projects. And the political versions of those are like who shot John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, the 9/11 stuff, and things like that. Vladimir Putin, President Xi Jinping, things like that. But Time Cross stuff, if you looked at those issues, those things that we dealt with, they were smaller. They weren't really big time showstoppers. The mysteries projects, or sometimes we call them celestial projects, those are bigger. Those are bigger. So bringing back Time Cross is not going to be a solution. The other thing is we have, with our Time Cross, we covered a lot of the things that people had been interested in. So, you just can't keep on chasing down the rabbit hole. You have to do things that are relevant and new, and that's what we're trying now with this political stuff. This is a political season. So the political stuff in the political season is important. It's a very intense political season. So, and we, according to our post-2024 election study, it looks like we might be heading towards Armageddon. I mean, like confrontation, military stuff in the streets, fighting. And so if that is maybe where we're going, and there's good evidence with the extreme polarization that we see in the United States right now, that may be where we're going, well, the political stuff that sort of explains all that is really important to do. So, someone who wrote Shakespeare, like going into that as a subject. That's an interesting topic. Was it one guy or was it more than one guy? I mean, there's a lot of questions about Shakespeare. And also, did the person who wrote the sonnets the same as the person who wrote some of the plays? Or, was it a collective thing or was it just one person? So, I mean, that's all interesting stuff, but it's a smaller scale mystery. It's not a big showstopper mystery. I was a English major, at Rutgers, so I really like, poetry and plays and stuff like that. So, but how many people are going to be really glued to their seats watching about stuff like that? All right, well, that's basically it for today, and I want to actually thank everybody for listening. We have a good audience of about 500 people, and this is the topic of how to talk about what we're going to be doing in our new project. Again, we're doing it in September. You're not going to see it until October, but this intelligence briefing, I wanted you to sort of be introduced to the idea that we're going to be shifting gears. And we're not bringing back human news, but this is a current political thing of explanation rather than prediction. So it's like human news in the sense that we're looking at stuff that happens in the world, but we're trying to explain it. We're not trying to predict it. So it's a different orientation, and it's going to have a political focus on it as well. All right, everybody. Hey, you guys have been great. I love doing these things. And again, this is going to stay up for a while on YouTube as a live stream. And some people complain when they see this because there's a lot of blank space in the beginning when we just have the bumper screen on. But we have to do that. We have to let people assemble for a while beforehand. And so, anyway, so that's what we do. But the permanent recording will go up on farsightprime.com. And we may actually leave this one up on YouTube. Since we're talking about something we're going to be covering on YouTube, we may actually leave this one up. So I may take down the live stream recording tomorrow or later today, actually, and put up on YouTube an edited version. The edited version is good because I have a good camera here recording it and really pristine audio. And then when we edit it and we put it together, the audio is really good and it looks a little better. And so sometimes we'll use that instead of the, I mean, I could leave up the live stream version, but the live stream version is heavily compressed with YouTube and everything like that. The audio is not as good, and it has that large dead time in the beginning. So putting up the edited version is sort of better. But, and I think I will leave this up on YouTube because here we're talking about what we're going to be doing in YouTube. So it's a good thing to leave up. So I'll be doing that. All right, everybody. The last thing I want to tell you is I hope you guys are listening at the end, is our next major mysteries project. I swear, guys, you got to see this one. It's not an ET thing. You know the thing you probably all heard about but wondered if it's true? The American Secret Space Program. The Secret Space Program. It's a real thing. All the sessions are done. Everything's ready. In the middle of the month in September, you're going to see it. The American Secret Space Program. I'll give you a little teaser for right now. With the disclosure stuff that was coming out in July and so on, it was clear that the U.S. has extraterrestrial spacecraft that they've been trying to reverse engineer and so on like that. Well, what do you think they're doing? Do you think they're all sitting around and just singing Kumbaya around the spaceships? No, they're trying to reverse engineer them so they can have their own ships. They want their own stuff. Now, they're not going to announce it to everybody that they have their own versions of these ET spaceships, but they're going to have their own secret space program. They're going to be doing stuff that you're not going to see. And just like the ET ships are cloaked, you don't see them. Well, the U.S. government's not going to let you see their spaceships. They want you to think we're still using jets and missiles and things like that. They don't want you to know the real stuff that they actually have, because that means it's no longer secret anymore. And secrecy is the main advantage that they have. But they have a secret space program. It's a real thing. And you're going to see it firsthand in just a few weeks in the middle of September. So be there or be square. You're going to love it. All right, everybody. I will talk to you soon, and I'll see you in next month's intelligence briefing, okay? And remember, October is when we start the political new stuff that's going to be coming out. That's when you're going to be seeing it. We're actually doing it in September. All right, everybody, you've been great. I love you guys. I love being here with you. I had a great audience, and I'll talk to you soon, okay? Take care.